Hi everybody, this is Carolyn Lovewell. I am still in the U-Haul with my friend Neil, the set designer person for Sleepover Mystery School, driving down for our third immersion this year. And something that's amazing about Neil is, I don't know if you remember, I started raving about Whitney Webb and all of her work with her One Nation Under Blackmail and all of this like deep, complete documentation she did of the intense corruption between like secret agencies, CIA,
FBI,
and the mafia, and all of this like sexual blackmail that goes on and has gone on for, I mean, she only documents about a century's worth, but there's probably for millennia it's been entwined in these deep ways. And it was a real eye-opener for me about how power moves in the world and about these various intense systems of control. And I was sharing with Neil about how I got shadow banned on Instagram because I was sharing memes about the CIA killing Kennedy, which is, by the way, 1000% true. If you haven't realized that already, there was a CIA coup. The CIA killed John F. Kennedy.
Like, it's long enough that we can just admit to it and you're okay with it.
Well, they're kind of okay with it. They're kind of not okay with it. I'm taking a risk on Spotify here and just talking about it because what the hell?
Well, one question. So this is just, what was the first conspiracy theory that you ever heard that you eventually found out to be true? Like sort of the eye-opening of like, what the fuck?
I mean, probably for me it was really the whole COVID pandemic thing.
Okay.
And like, you know, the conspiracy theory in quotation marks that it was made in a lab in Wuhan, that it was a planned thing, that it was a massive psyop. Like that, it became very evident to me that that was completely true.
But that's the first though, or like not even conspiracy.
Oh,
like
well, I mean,
okay,
well, like 9/11 was an inside job.
Right.
That was like a totally. I mean, that was just this weird, sick war game on the part of the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned about.
Yeah.
That wanted, you know, like we were talking earlier.
Warned about too.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how, you know, there were about 3,000 people died on 9/11, and then the U.S.'s retaliation killed millions of people.
And so about under 3,000, including the hijackers, but the total cost of war is estimated somewhere around like 4.5 million people died as our retaliation for 3,000.
Right, everything in Iraq and Afghanistan and around the world, and obviously that the U.S. didn't do that out of some deep sense of revenge. Obviously that was an economic, like, the engine of war wanted to gear up. And
poppy fields in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so like Neil and I started out talking today about like, okay, so Neil and I, we're 1984 babies, and George Orwell, exactly.
Well, funny fact, I was born on June 25th. That's the same birthday as George Orwell. And you read the book 1984, so I used to always be like, I'm just primed for it.
Yeah, well, we're very primed for it. So so the George Orwell stuff makes us sensitive to it, and we were talking about how, you know, I've seen a lot of stuff on Instagram with people very upset about the U.S. funding of Israel and what Israel is doing in Palestine, and how, you know, heart-wrenching it is to see these civilians murdered. And it's a little bit surprising to me to see that people are so surprised that this is what U.S. tax dollars does, because I vividly remember the Iraq War and protesting the Iraq War, and, you know, U.S. tax dollars going directly to the murder of plenty of civilians in Iraq, which upset me greatly. I mean, it's a tragic, horrible thing. But it's like, I guess what I've been seeing is just like people, maybe Generation Z people, with it just now dawning on them that there's this twisted war machine in action that has nothing to do with their desires, their votes, representative democracy, anything like that. And I'm like, hey, and now I'm just like the jaded millennial, whatever, that's like, well, welcome kid to the cynical, tragic party of now knowing that this is how.
And when you interact with people who are like, no, that's not how it is, it's like, so reason I asked about like what was the first thing that made you think like, wait, maybe conspiracy theory, there's something to conspiracy theories. I watched a thing a long time ago.
Conspiracy fact, you mean?
Conspiracy, I was like, wait, like 9/11 was weird. I'll just say 9/11 was weird. But then I found out about like the Gulf of Tonkin incident when I was in college. And I was like, wait a second, are you saying that like the Vietnam conflict, because it was never a declaration of war was signed, was literally kickstarted by like a fake article that got published and then was later retracted on like page 4 or whatever? I was like, holy fuck. I was like, you know, like you heard about that as a kid growing up about the times, like hippie generation, whatever, but you're like, no, that's like a known fact. Like, we did that. We did that in all these companies.
There's so much stuff. There's so much of it that's completely documented and agreed to. And then it blows my mind, like, you know, all of the CIA Project Paperclip stuff and
scientists,
Monarch, all of that. That's all well known. And then people are like, I don't know.
They're like, I don't believe it. And you're like, how do you not believe it? How do you not believe it? It's like, are you reading alternative history? Like, you know, there's this idea of memo history, like pneumatic history, or it's history the way people remember it, not actually factually based.
Yeah.
And so there's so much memo history of like, people are like, no, I don't believe it. It's like, no. Like, if you look at history, if you look at the facts, even stuff that the CIA has released, you're like, oh, they're just admitting to it just decades later.
Yeah, that's how they roll. And so anyways, we were just talking about this because I don't know, I guess it seems to us that more and more people are aware of this. And it's funny to me, like, how much... Okay, so I have an old friend of mine who works for a bank. He's a lifelong Democrat, happily votes Democrat, very, like, liberal, and sort of mainstream in his outlook. I would say, like, watches MSNBC with satisfaction. And I mentioned to him the other day about how the CIA killed Kennedy and the CIA, killed Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X and Robert F. Kennedy and completely took over the country. And he was like, oh, yeah. And I don't know, it was just interesting to me because he, like, somehow holds that in mind at the same time. Like, he has this sort of, like, he knows what's going on and he also just participates in...
It just goes along with it.
It just goes... Anyways, I think that's... More and more people are like that they're sort of living in this sort of compartmentalized awareness. And I guess I'm on a deep integrative quest. I'm always trying to make the unconscious conscious and...
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a conversation, I won't say it's an argument, with my parents, and it was about who are you going to vote for? And interestingly, I just proposed that I was going to vote for RFK Jr. And they're like, voting for RFK Jr. is voting for Trump. I was like, no, a vote for RFK Jr. is a vote for RFK Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, he'll never win. Therefore, you have to pick one of the two. I was like, so the illusion of choice is not actually a choice. But also, once again, like, a vote for one person is not a vote for someone else. And I get that logic, but I was like, if that's the logic, then it will always be that way. It will always
be a choice between these two gross, decrepit
terrible
old men.
Terrible. I'm tired of old white men telling me what to do. And it's like they're doing a terrible job at it. And it's like their idea of war is you fight fire with fire. It's like, well, we've seen that fail over and over and over again. So you get to this level, and it's like I'm arguing with them, and I'm literally saying to my dad, because part of my argument was like, you want to just back this military-industrial complex, like this idea that like this thing is there, it's been in power, we've known it's been in power, you just want to keep acting. He's like, you won't change it. I was like, with that mentality, you're right. We never will.
Never get. And I just feel like saying it's not just a military-industrial complex. It's a military petro-pharmaceutical complex. So it's like the petrochemicals go into the pharmaceuticals, and they go into the food, and they go into the water and the land and the air, and it's like one giant poison racket.
Yeah.
It's just like, how do we make
profit? It's like, what the fuck? And it does make you want to just bury your head in the sand. It makes you think like, oh, this is just too much. Like the Whitney Webb thing was crazy, because if you deep dive down the Whitney Webb like rabbit hole, like right away what she's saying isn't just like made up, because you can go look it up for yourself.
It's all documented.
But it's so dense. It's so dense. You're like, holy shit, I can't take 4 more hours of her saying stuff because I just need a mental break. I need to go and like hug a tree. I need to like process something else, that feels tangible that I can affect, because this has been going on.
So people
for
should
so
definitely
long.
hug trees, and they should definitely also
Listen
to Whitney Webb and read
Yeah.
her books, because she is like making the unconscious conscious in this really deep way. This whole like web of extreme messed upness that has been underlying certainly all of American political life and all of the intense power moves for a long time on this planet. And you know what was interesting is somebody asked me today if I had heard about the book called The Game of Saturn, which is this wonderful book by Peter Mark Adams, who's an art historian, and it's about this tarot deck, the Visconti Sforza tarot deck, which was this tarot deck painted in Renaissance Italy, and it has like very dark Saturnian themes. And I told them, look, you read that book and you read Whitney Webb and you put that together and you start to understand a whole lot about reality, that once you understand it, you are not able to unsee it.
Yeah.
Because it's like the world has been functioning in this deep, twisted, Italian warring city-states, magical Saturn sexual sacrifice blackmail
Right.
way for a long time.
Some of it coming out of the mafia, the back. It's so wild.
Yeah,
how
the
it
mafia,
just
the
weaves into
Vatican,
everything.
the banks,
You could trace it back. And what's interesting is, maybe people listening to this, like, they're like, oh, I already know that. Like, just like your MSNBC friend. It's like, oh, I already know that. But then, like, there's the current ongoing situation of, like, well, what might come next?
Yeah,
right?
what next?
And
can we please have something other than this?
What's coming next is like, well, based on the tea that's been given to me, and I don't know if...
this is why I wanted to record again, because Neil has heard things from the intelligence community through Neil's connections.
It's not good.
Well,
it's
let
not
the people know, Neil. Tell them what to do.
First thing I will preface with, the problem with the intelligence community and any information that comes out of it is it's designed to always be paranoid, right? So it's designed to operate through fear and let's have an offensive strategy. Let's have a defensive, like let's be able to react before our opponent reacts so that we can stop this. And what's nice about that is in some ways it can drive you nuts, right? If you're in the intelligence community, or it's also something that can make you prepared for whatever might come next.
Yeah. But you heard this in sort of a low-key way, which sounds to me like it's not like a public disinformation campaign. It sounds to me like it's sort of more of an internal memo.
So, I would say back in February, I get a call from a friend who sort of like updated me on a situation. And what it came down to is like, at the time, they knew that there were all these hackings that were going on, that Russia launched like a satellite. And you had like, you could look at it on the internet at the time, like at the news reports, but not too much information was covered based on what this person was saying, but they were telling me a lot.
Like Russia hacking social media?
Well, like Chinese affiliated groups were hacking, and they know that they had captured some really important information about America's cybersecurity at the time. They knew that there were vulnerabilities within code that was almost like problematically spread across a lot of infrastructure in the United States, and that Russia at the time, I think it was like the press secretary said that there was like this nuclear satellite up there, and then everyone defaulted to like, oh, Russia put a nuclear bomb in space. But it was like they quickly like retracted that, and then someone from the intelligence community came up and said like, no, we don't want to give you a false sense of that, we don't want to scare anybody, that we know that Russia launched a satellite, but we don't really know, all the details aren't clear. We're going to take like a community initiative approach and sort of figure out what's going on. Well, what they were actually doing is they were briefing people in the intelligence community to brief their families to say, have a 30-day supply of food and water ready to go, just in case something happens. Because right now, we know that there are vulnerabilities within our infrastructure that have been very well not only discovered, but like have been tested. And we don't currently have a defense against them because it's all over the place in these municipalities and places that have sewer lines and whatever. They don't have the funding or the resources to like update the code.
Wait. Okay, so I just want to get this straight. So so you heard they were telling people who work for them, for their agency, get 30-day supplies of food and water because we have a vulnerable infrastructure.
Right.
And we're anticipating some kind of breakdown or attack from Russia or China.
And tell your family who you care about to have a 30-day supply of food and water, because the idea is if something happens, like there's a power outage, there's some disruption in the supply chain, whatever it may be, if you, like, your main priority in the intelligence community is you have to report to duty, right? If something happens that seems destabilizing, you have to go to base. You cannot be worried about your family or getting them water because you have to report. And like the main idea is like established government like gets things back up and running. Then you go for emergency services, medical services, you get the police doing whatever. But like people are kind of last in that chain. And if you know that, and you know that your family doesn't have a 30-day supply of food and water and they can just hang out in their house for 30 days, it's like that's going to make you less usable to the intelligence community because you're going to try and, do things for yourself. So they basically said, and you can tell other people. This is like, it's probably happened a few times in history. This is the first time that I was being told about this through people that I knew who I really trusted, And,
well, so that makes sense. I guess I'm just like, what do you think? They would just zap our electricity grid or what?
Well, what's really wild about this is I was told this information. I was like, man, like, who do you tell about this? Who's not going to just be like, you're being really paranoid or being really weird. Like, you can get some stuff. It's like, well, you feel like you got to tell some family. Maybe you don't want to tell your friends who get really depressed because it might just make them even more depressed. But you go out and you start to look into the information. I had one good friend who was like, well, yeah, but if that was true, it'd be in the news. Like, somehow this information would get out there. Oh, what a
sweetheart.
Yeah, and
I believed that.
And I was thinking, and I was like, maybe you're right. Maybe some of this is just people spreading some misinformation, and I'm just absorbing it. The news all came out. It just came out over like a 2.5 month period of time. Like, it was just slowly let out, like one week after another. So the week after they told me about that, I think it was, they admitted that Russia had launched a nuclear-powered weapon into space that had the capability of disarming satellites. So they're like, oh, there's this thing up there. We actually have no defense for it. Can't just shoot it out of the sky. It would cause chaos with all the other satellites that are up there. You can't do it, right? So they're like, they kind of put up an ultimatum. Then on the other side, the United States Cybersecurity Administration admitted that their computers were hacked like weeks before I was told that information, and that someone who is probably Chinese-affiliated hacker group downloaded all these files that were like tests about what would be the worst case scenario, like what would be the worst way to take out the U.S. grid, where are we the weakest, like, worst case scenario, and like they downloaded it. They stole it from the Cybersecurity Administration.
Okay, well that makes sense, that if somebody were like hacking into the power companies, that they could... Power,
sewer, water. It doesn't take a lot to disrupt a lot, And what they were afraid of is not exactly like... this is where we have to get out of like, oh, there's always an enemy in like a war movement. It's always like Russia or China. It's like, that's a ridiculous notion. What they were worried about is like the United States being in a position where it's weak, and also it's not in the good graces of other countries around the world. So like maybe China just, leaks out that information to like an Iranian affiliated hacker group who has more negative intentions, and they're just like, oh, let's just do a coordinated attack and just take out a bunch of, power grid. Let's do this, let's do that. Whatever the case may be, it does get into this level where it's like, well, you have to have that, preparedness, like 30-day supply of food or water or whatever. Otherwise, like, you would be scrambling. And in the current state of our country where we are so divided over this, like, political thing, if it happened around, before, after, during election time, wherever, people would just attack each other. And that was literally part of the documentation that the Cybersecurity Administration admitted losing, is like a number of these coordinated attacks would just turn people against each other.
Well, see, so that's the thing is like, I feel like the extreme polarization of like people, like I'm afraid to talk to people who they might not like my political stance and get really crazily upset with me because it's happened enough. So I've become more reserved, and I've become like less friendly, and I hate that because I feel like that is this messed up psychological warfare working its way on me, because I feel like it has been a divisive thing through the social media. of like making it ever more extreme, ever more crazy, this side and that side, red versus blue.
So dividing, right?
And it was just not like that. Like, growing up, it was not as extreme of a deal if somebody was a Republican or a Democrat, and now it's become like this life or death.
Yeah, you can't stand each other.
Yeah.
So what's wild, I had a friend a long time ago who studied politics, and it was like ancient Roman politics, like what basically studied history, like the history of politics. And he's like, the thing that they realized a long time ago is as long as they kept people divided, the politicians never had to worry about being overthrown by the people. So our government for the longest time kept us divided, but it was generally in like a civil sense, right? And with social media, the way that it works, it's like, this already came out, what was it, like 19 of the 20 like Christian affiliated like Facebook groups were run by like Russian like troll farms. It's like those tactics that our government used to keep us under control are now being used against us by other government to make us even more angry with each other, to like break down discourse so that we're not communicating, so that we're desensitized from stuff, so that we're stressed out. And it's sad in a way where it's like I have to have conversations with friends now who will just pull out words of absolutism and how they can't talk or relate to anybody else about this. And it's like, you just realize that by you doing that, you're not allowing for a conversation. Like, you're not going to meet somebody who you disagree with, they disagree with you, but you're not going to find common ground by just insulting them. And like when we talk about the current state of like how the let's say corporate media structures how they describe like what's going on in Israel and Palestine, they say that if you're pro-Israeli, that you're if you're pro-Israeli, that you're if you're pro-Palestinian, that you're anti-Semitic, mm-hmm. right? As if like I was against Joe Biden, that's making me anti-Catholic. That's kind of like a ridiculous notion. Or if you're pro-Palestinian, you're pro-Hamas, as if the Palestinian people are definitively Hamas. It's like, wait, that language is deeply problematic. Mm-hmm. It's like, but the thing is, when people use that language, you can't come to common ground with somebody else.
Oh, no, it's like utterly hysterical. And it's kind of blowing my mind how much I've seen it on Instagram and mm-hmm. X, whatever it used to be, Twitter, like just off the charts, like racist, hateful language about Jews, about Muslims, about the situation being used by Americans who are having fights about this and with each other, and I guess troll farms and bots and like the whole thing, and who the heck knows what's real. But I mean, I do know there are some people that I know in real life mm-hmm. who are also saying like off the charts, like crazy stuff that I would never have anticipated them saying. And it seems to be socially acceptable now to like call for mass murder and be socially applauded for it. It's very strange. And anyways, it's it's a
boiling point. It seems like we're getting to, mm-hmm. and the fascinating thing is, in that sense where like, yeah, you can't relate to your neighbors, you can't communicate with your neighbors, all it takes is like, oh, the power's been out for 4 days. Right. To have I can very easily see that. I'm like, man, I should probably bake my neighbors some cookies right now to forestall this, because it'll get intense fast. And what's funny is all the communities that had like people who were prepping or whatever, it's like, oh my God, you know how empowered they're going to be? They're like, we told you so. So also funny, what was it after, was it January 6th? Was that Trump's mm-hmm. like big thing, the date there? So what's funny is after that, all the people who were sort of like anti-gun went out and bought guns. So there was this huge like upsurge in gun sales, and mainly went to Democratic states and Democratic registered voters, because they were like, hey, we're now afraid of these people coming. I was like, so now both sides are pretty well armed. And it's like, you have people that either are doing it for fear or aren't trained or have never shot a gun in their life. It's like, you shut out the power, and then someone's trying to grab something off a shelf in a store. It's like, oh, terrible things would be happening. Yeah. Terrible. Not super pretty. And our government knows, you know. One of the reasons why I like talking to you, Neil, is because I feel like you do really have an integral consciousness where, like, you don't get easily
I've actually never heard you say anything like really polarized or super negative about anything or anyone. And that's really refreshing, because I feel like there's, even amongst people who consider themselves spiritual, there's a whole lot of like nutty town, demonizing of other groups of people who don't agree with them. And I truly believe that like the path forward for humanity is coming into an integral consciousness where we learn how to equally value two points of view at the same time that seem opposing, and hold the space, hold the tension of the opposites to invite the grace in, to invite the transcendent function to come in and show us the way forward. Understanding that like the crazy polarization and like directing the hatefulness is not gonna be the way forward. It's not gonna take us anywhere good.
And also, what did you say about the cycle that we're in, like the planetary cycle, and how that aligns with like the last? Like,
what did I say about it? I mean, a lot of people talk about the oncoming of the age of Aquarius. I think in the precession of the equinoxes, we're in sort of a liminal time between Pisces and Aquarius. Was there some other planetary
it's like
thing?
Pluto, and it's like.
Oh well, I don't know, the astrologers that I listen to. I really like Adam Ellenboss, who's a Hellenistic astrologer, talking about how what's coming in, I forget exactly when it happens, late 2024, early 2025, Neptune moves into Aries. And the last time Neptune moved into Aries was the start of the Civil War in the U.S. And the U.S. has also been having its Pluto return. And anyways, there's also another astrologer that I like. Oh, why am I blanking on his name? Who does the Austin Coppock. Austin Coppock talks to this guy, Gordon White from Rune Soup. And they have this whole deep astrological forecast thing where they will go and look at the year to come and the next year. And they've been describing, I guess, pretty much like global chaos in the coming years, which makes sense.
Well, and I mean, the other thing about that too is it's interesting because a lot of people have the mindset that if something bad happens here, that they'll just go somewhere else.
Right.
But I was recently in Switzerland, and what's fascinating was talking to people from Belgium, like France, like Switzerland, and other parts of Europe, saying how it's bad, like the way that politicians act in the United States, it's definitely different, but like the controls that they sort of have over the people are very similar. And there are other things, like people are talking about losing certain social services in France and this, that, and third. And it's like, so if we were in some sort of chaotic state, other parts of the world would probably also be in some sort of chaotic state. And it's not like they're going to be like, oh, let's go reach out and help all the Americans who lost power and are shooting each other. Like what's going on right now in Haiti. It's like how long that's taking for various governments around the world to get together to figure out how to go in and try and stabilize a place that is, currently being like, people are shooting each other every day. So we start doing that here. Other governments are going to kind of just wait till I think we calm down a bit and then maybe come in with some food and aid. But what's so wild about watching what's going on in Israel and Palestine is the way that we've responded to trying to support people who are starving, and it's like it's only a matter of time before like that's happening to us, and people are like, how come I didn't get the services that I thought were mine? It's like because they're not, like, the government really isn't guaranteeing that it's gonna like look out for you at the end of the day. It's guaranteeing it's gonna look out for itself.
It's a mafia racket. It's a protection racket. That's the primary thing.
So if you're working for the government, you're probably doing a great job right now. You're probably all right.
Yeah, well, it's I don't know, it's an interesting thing. I guess things have been so extreme and so held together by corruption and blackmail and rather nefarious things for a long time, and all of the massive amounts of, spying and surveillance that's done on the American population, at least, is like really impressive. With like Julian Assange tried to talk about, and Edward Snowden,
and the fact that it all came out, the NSA, everything came out, and then the government's like, yeah, I'll close the door on that later. It's like, wait a second, and it's like, you just admitted to massive spying. What are we doing? Oh, we're going to continue it. We're just making it legal because we're going to sign papers that say it's legal. It's like, damn, okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like there is like more and more awareness that people have that the government is a protection racket. There is...
it's like shoddy insurance.
It is.
We're there when you need us. Well, no, we're not. Hey, maybe you spent too much money on that shitty insurance.
That, that we have... that our democracy is not functioning, has not been functioning for a long time. Obviously, there's always been inequality in the world, but we seem to have found a way to take it to vast new heights. And I guess I am just like really curious, is like all of this pressure going to lead to a new level of awakening? Yeah. What do you think? What's happening in human consciousness, Neil? What's your sense?
So, I mean, my sense is based off of like the idea of yin and yang. Like when one becomes one extreme, it moves to the other. When it becomes extreme yin, it becomes yang. When it becomes extreme yang, it becomes yin. I thought a long time ago that was more or less going to happen with Trump, right? I was like, oh, here we go. Like people were really mad. Everybody was sad. I remember sitting at friends' house and people were like, Donald Trump's been elected president. You're like, damn. Like it was a heavy weight. I thought that was going to be the switch, but all it did was it switched to Biden, right? And now we're looking at all these conflicts around the world and how they're being funded by the United States and how people are actively boycotting them and protesting them, and no change. It only seems like it just fuels the politicians to be more divided from the people. So it might just have to be this point where we go to one extreme to come out onto another. Like, if it's a giant awakening, like, that would be great. If people are suddenly like, let's get back to staring at the stars and under the, singing around the campfire and dancing in, this blackout that may or may not happen. That would be amazing. But it really does come down to how prepared are people, and then how many people are just going to panic. And the trust in the system means that you're trusting that it's going to provide for you, but you're going to be the one that's going to panic. So I don't know. Like, this
is one of the fascinating things to me about modern society that I'm still working on understanding. So, like the rise of birth control and industrialization enabled feminism in this fascinating way. But at the same time that like women have been like encouraged to be so much more independent and educated and have their own money and their own sense of self, all of that is enabled by government. So it's not like women are independent of masculinity. It's that they are relying on the masculinity of these vast bureaucratic systems to create safety, in the sense of like, I know when I walk down the street, I don't know any martial arts, I don't carry a gun, I'm usually not robbed. I think I've been mugged once in my life, so usually I'm not robbed. And that is because there is this police presence and this general societal whatever, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm being protected by institutions and bureaucracies and the government in a certain sense, and I'm not... Anyways.
And maybe people are like, hey, we don't need to all harm each other to get what we want. There's other ways of doing it. So I
mean, the good level of it is that there's, goodwill and mutual support, and we've just agreed as a society to minimize the amount that we attack women on the streets. So there's that. But there's also the fact that I am protected by the police force to an extent, which has to do with all sorts of layers of class and race and history and property ownership and cameras and surveillance and everything. And I just find that interesting, and I find it interesting the way in which there is this, like, reliance and dependency that so many of us have on all of these comforts and on all of these things supplied by corporations and supplied
Wi-Fi, GPS. I mean, how am I going to get to where we're going on this trip if I didn't have GPS right now?
Yeah, it would be. We would have to learn to navigate by the stars.
Yeah, we can't see them while the lights are on, so that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and well, it's an interesting thing because it's like, in a way, there's more and more individuality and autonomy than ever before because there's not the same traditions holding people in patterns of behavior. But in another way, there's absolutely less autonomy and independence in the U.S. than ever before. Because,
and, breakdown in community. Like, before, community used to be like everybody knew their neighbors. It's like, well, now you could move into an apartment and just your day job might just be on a computer. Other people have a busy schedule. They have kids. You don't even know your neighbors, right?
I don't really know my neighbors.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's
exactly.
wild. I mean, I know the two people directly next to me. But whenever I lived in Polish Hill, which was like a smaller, tight-knit community, I knew everybody. And then people were like, Polish Hill is so cool. And it got a lot more expensive. And then everybody moved out. And now my friends who have moved out are like, I didn't know anyone there anymore. So the breakdown is, I would say primarily technologically driven, it seems like. Because if you could find everything that you're looking for on your computer and on your TV whenever you come home from work, it's like you're probably not going to go out and look around for just people to talk to in your community.
It's true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, so do you foresee this just continuing then, like the isolation and the atomization?
I think as long as we're having conversations like this, no. But it really comes down to like this conversation might lead to you being like, I'm making cupcakes for my neighbors.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a good thing. A lot of times the conversations I'll get in with people where I'm trying to not play devil's advocate, but I'm trying to get them to just say, like, you have to talk to people and have discourse to find common ground. If you immediately cut out what they're saying, we're always going to be divided. And the biggest thing is I feel like just social media, inherently the algorithms are designed to keep you on the platform and to show you the things that would trigger you the most to stay on the platform and argue.
Yeah, and I feel like it paints people of other political persuasions also as inherently hateful or retarded or mentally challenged, like they're stupid or something. Like only stupid, hateful people could believe XYZ.
Yeah.
And the hypnosis towards that is really, really deep.
It's almost like the hypnosis my parents have, well, you'll never change that. And it's like, wait, no, you can choose to not be on social media. You could choose to not vote for the candidates that are the only choices, it seems like.
Yeah, so tell me about what do you like about Bobby Kennedy?
What was interesting? I think the thing that I liked about him the most was whenever he talked, he kind of made sense.
I mean, he's hot. He's way hotter than
I heard
the other
he works
two.
out in jeans.
Oh my God, he's built. Oh my Lord, he is ripped. Have you seen it? He does push-ups.
So, well, this is what was...
I mean, I say that with such amazement because I can't imagine Donald Trump or Joe Biden doing push-ups.
Jeez. That's that'd be a funny video to get AI to recreate. It probably can't even figure it out itself.
But yeah, what do you like about him?
What was interesting is I was speculating on, RFK Jr. is going to run. That's interesting. I don't know that much about him, but that's interesting that this other candidate would run who has a political background. And then immediately people were always telling me, oh, no, you can't vote for him because he's anti-abortion. I was like, really? I didn't know he was anti-abortion. He's anti-birth control, everything, this, that, and the third. I was like, that kind of matches up with the current status of everything. But I was like, is he really? And then I Googled it, and I realized that all these things that people were saying about him weren't actually true. The one thing that I read was actually through, I think it's Snopes, Snopes or whatever, they trying to, weed out the bullshit and the political landscape. And they wrote this thing, they're like, is he against abortion? It's like, no, he just happened to say at one point that he believes himself that every abortion in some way, shape, or form is a tragedy, for whether it's the mother who's getting the abortion or what. But it's it's not an easy conversation, but people should be entitled to get it, especially if there's a medical need for it. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, that's the exact opposite thing that the Christian right seems to be saying right now. And that was the opposite thing that other people were telling me, I can't vote for him. At the same time, it's you had this person who had a career as a lawyer who fought against some things that nowadays, we're kind of looking at is like maybe common sense, like, you know, what is it, safe mercury in...
Yeah. He's the only person to have won class action lawsuits against corporations like Monsanto and places like... He's amazing.
Usually people take the buyout, they take the check, and then they go work for Monsanto. Right, but he was probably at this point where he's like, well, fuck it, I'm already kind of set, I'm a Kennedy.
Exactly, and I've seen my father and my uncle murdered by the CIA, so I'm not interested in the sellout.
The sellout doesn't lead to good things, right? It perpetuates these problems, which the thing is, I think, in general, it's like, you might not love the country that you're in, but you're in this country. Like, you're born in it, you're a citizen of it, like, border states, whatever it is. So in some ways, it's like, leave or try and make the best out of it. And in this sense where you're looking at just the long term, like, the United States is really good at looking at the short term of things. Short-term profit, short-term gain, short-term this. But in the long run, it's like, if you just common sense look at the things that we've been doing to ourselves, or generations have been doing over and over again, you know it can't end well. Like, it ends in these situations where, like, think about this. If we had some sort of, like, socialistic power companies, or the Army Corps of Engineers decided a long time ago that we needed to separate the grid or update the security. Some of these things that, like the government is talking about being afraid of wouldn't be problems, right? That's why it's not problems in other countries, because they're like, well, no, this is something that people rely on. Maybe we should take the initiative and make it so it's as secure as possible, it's as reliable as possible, and it benefits everybody. But no, we go through corporations that tell us that we need to fight.
Like the jankiest profit motive, like the jankiest, cheapest, ugliest shit that can be built. Let's run with that.
Let's run with that, and let's make micro iterations and charge as much as possible, right? And then you have like, there's this huge push for electric cars. Awesome, love it. But then, literally, the counter argument is the infrastructure can't support it. It's like, why? Why can't the infrastructure support it? Oh yeah, because it's a piece of shit that hasn't been updated in a long time. It's like, well, what has our government been doing? Like, what have they been passed? It's like in Pittsburgh, where, you know, we so happily live. It's like, there's something like, it's almost like, maybe I might be making this up. 8 out of 10 of like the bridges are in like this really poor condition.
Oh yeah, remember when that bridge fell down in Baltimore? I was like,
the day that Biden came to talk. Well, the bridge collapsed, but that was tanker ran into it.
Oh right.
But in Pittsburgh, we straight up had a bridge just collapse.
Oh yeah.
And that was the day that Biden came to talk about a new infrastructure bill, and everyone's like, conspiracy. But the bridge was shit to begin with, right? It was a matter of time. It's like. And then what I don't know, I got in trouble for this, but in Pittsburgh, we had this one person who, you know, his favorite thing to tout is that he got LED street lamps put in, so he saves all this power, but they flicker, they fucked up. So he gets all these bright white LED street lamps put in, and then they somehow get like $12 million to put RGB LED lights on bridges in Pittsburgh. But like, years before that, I actually had a conversation with that exact person where he said it took 14 years to get about $14 million to redo a bridge. And that was the city getting approval from the state, getting approval from the federal government, getting like passed out. And then it's like, then they could finally build this bridge. I was like, wait, so you're telling me that you lit up a bridge for $12 million. We've got busted bridges all over Pittsburgh, not even just the United States, all over Pittsburgh. And then it took $14 million to build another one in a number of years. I was like, why? Like that, like you can't be excited about that. You know, and it ultimately went to like pay the electric companies in Pittsburgh. I think it's somewhere around like the electric bill that they're getting now for these like fancy lights on the bridges is like $70,000 a year because they're going to run 24/7. The original project that it came out of was supposed to be this green initiative by this environmental artist where they got wind power to power the lights on the bridge, and everyone thought it looked so cool that they decided to like scale it up. Well, now it's no longer wind powered. I was like, and the environmental artists got their cut. I was like, damn, everybody sold out along the way. And it's like, okay, once again, the short-term thinking, the long-term
Well, this is what is, I mean, because it is all so out of alignment with the Dow. Like, how could this possibly even have gone on as long as it has? This, like, insane short-term, like, selling out as quick as possible, as fast as possible. I am curious, like, where does it end? How does it stop? How does the madness conclude?
This is why I'm wondering if you're, you know, the idea of, like, some big epic event brings everybody together and people are like, we've been fucking up for a long time, or if it literally comes down to a thing of needs. Like, if there's more of a breakdown in society where you can kind of only get what you need, you have to let go of those other wants, those other like fruitless desires, the things that don't really serve you purpose but maybe cause a lot of stress in your life. Maybe you put down the computer for 2 weeks straight and you don't get on it. Whatever that case is, it's like something has to change, and I think people want a change. So the trade-off is like, I forget what it was, but it was a long time ago. Do you remember there was just this abundant amount of zombie everything, zombie TV shows, zombie movies? It's like, well, like originally George Romero, also from Pittsburgh, his original commentary was on society and how people are like zombies to like commercialism.
Consumer
like
zombies. Monroeville Mall, what?
Yeah, consumer zombies. But then it became this thing of like, oh, we kind of do wish that most of us would be eliminated and we're just down to survival, because basic survival just seems like it'd be really fun in comparison to me working my 9 to 5 and being stuck on this computer doing this thing that I don't really love doing. And it's like, I don't know if the zombie apocalypse is going to be your savior. It's like, I'm not saying it's impossible. I don't know what's possible on that front, but like when we're buying into that, we're basically buying into a fantasy to try and escape from the reality that we're wanting to bury our head in the sand from, right? And the conversations stop when you bury your head. Well,
I guess this is one of the reasons why we do Sleepover Mystery School is because we're working to create as much of a deep change in culture and consciousness as we can. And I really believe that a culture is built around ritual, and part of why the United States is so depraved is there's like such an absence of ritual. Like there's zero, there's decrepit Catholicism, there's Protestantism, which doesn't really have rituals other than listening to a sermon, and that's what a shit ritual is that. And it's anyways like,
well, then you got televangelist Christianity, that's like prosperity gospel. Oh, okay.
I love me some prosperity gospel, but it's not a real ritual. And like a ritual has like drama and depth and artistry and beauty.
Transformation too.
And we've been so starved from that. Like the spiritual bankruptcy is so dramatic. So anyways, that's one of the reasons why I'm grateful for Sleepover Mystery School, because I feel like it is like this really deep, quenching oasis in a hideous consumer desert of like genuine tradition and genuine hermetic blossoming and beauty.
Yeah, and just it's funny, it's sometimes the simple things of like just not having your phone for like a weekend and like interacting with other people, even though like you might have come into something and you're like hesitant or you're dealing with some like neurodivergent tendencies, like whatever it may be. It's like you ultimately see people open up and bond, and people are very different in the group. They've always been different, but you see a common bonding experience, and then people remember, oh yeah, I can go out and socialize and enjoy life. And actually, I really enjoyed putting down my phone for a period of time. It's like kind of just a reminder. It's like, you don't have to go to a meditation, like a 10-day meditation retreat to feel that. But I don't know. There's something really cool about just the additional benefits that come out of it, in my sense. Like outside of even just the ritual, just people congregating and talking.
Well, yeah, I guess what I think though is that the ritual enables people to like have a much deeper connection and conversation. It is a bonding experience. There's profound magic being done.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't think that if we just got people together, like hang out,
had a party
for like 4 weekends, I don't think they would achieve the levels of depth and connection that they do.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, I'm curious, Neil, what motivated you to want to be connected to reviving the mysteries? Like,
oh yeah, so I think, prior to meeting you and Layla, I had just personal experiences that I felt like were difficult to share or meet people on the same level. What's interesting is and even like I would share those, and some people would offer and say that it was transformative what happened with me, and I shared with that. But funny story, I ended up at the ceremony that I met you and Layla at because a friend who was like my hairstylist who used to tell these stories to was like, hey, I thought there was this really cool thing that you wanted to do, and I wanted to get it to you for your birthday. So someone hearing me talk about just how there's transformation, psychedelic and non-psychedelic, just spiritual transformations, it's like, this seems like something that you might be into. You want to like take a look at it. Around that time, I was learning about the Eleusinian mysteries, and I was like, holy shit, I was like, this makes sense where most of the Catholic Church got its rituals. And I was like, oh, this also makes sense why all these men like hoarded power by stealing the rituals from women. and like pretty much like bastardizing them. Because if like, and we still live in this society, like politically speaking, we have people that are just kind of bastardizing the way in which we could live in peace and harmony with each other. Like steering it so that it's like, oh, it's all about profit, it's all about greed, it's all about, you know, like culling the herd, so to speak. And like, it always seems to be older men, I'll just say even white men predominantly, are out there just killing younger people. You know, it's like, whoa, you know, that's been going on for too long, and it's sad. And so the interesting thing about the Eleusinian mysteries is the fact that people went through these amazing transformations. What little information we know about it seems to be mind-blowingly cool. Like, if you knew that it was available, you would sign up immediately, right? If it was that your friend talked about it, but they couldn't tell you about it, it's like, so it just seemed like something that needed to come back for like long-term thinking. Right? Because the short term isn't getting us anywhere. You know, it's already told us that psychedelics and everything else for the past, 50 years have been wrong. And then the more we learn about it, the more that we just come to terms with like, no, that's a part of our history, that's a part of our roots. Like, that was a part of how people like got deeper, like bonded together, had rituals. It's like, well, why did we give that up? You know, it's usually probably a short sell. Like early Catholic Church power tripping,
1,000% power tripping, 1,000%. Yeah, well, thanks. I love to hear that, and I think that that's really true. Like, that's what me and David, for the whole Immortal College and for Sleepover Mystery School, like, we're really trying to seed something that blossoms for, thousands of years. Just like the Mystery School at Eleusis operated for thousands of years and brought people in touch with their immortal souls in like a tangible, deep way.
And stemming off of just like magic in general, like the Golden Dawn's legacy is still affecting people. It's like, well, a lot of the information they pulled goes back even further. So I don't know. The history to me is always fascinating. It's why, like, when you talk about, I don't seem to be like polarized on one thing or another. It's like, because usually when you dig into the history, you're like, oh, it's way more gray than it ever was black and white. There's way more and there's probably and also, what is it they say, like, history is told by the people who like were victorious in the end. It's like, you're like, it's just murky. It's really murky. So it's fascinating, but to like, I've had a lot of talk with people who are either like somatic practitioners or just the idea of like discovering ritual for self and making new ritual. It doesn't have to be something that it came directly from 10,000 years ago. It's like, if you make it into something and it's transformational, it is ritual. That's how those things were created in the first place. So, and if they were lost, well, then it's kind of our job to kind of dig back into the deepness of our brain or our DNA or whatever holds that information, our ancestors, and like create from that point and like grow from that.
Yeah, I feel like it's in the morphogenetic field. That is one of the things that's really cool about the rituals of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Like, just doing those rituals like put me into the stream of being able to connect with other Hermetic magicians and other like consciousnesses that knew how to do these rituals, and that's where the Mystery School unfolded from. And that's, I don't know, just something that I have. That's why I want everybody to go do magic, is because I want them to all experience this internal education that comes from putting yourself in the morphogenetic field of these centuries of magicians.
What I also think is funny, when I tell people that I do things that are magic related, I love bringing up the idea of like a skeptic, because skeptics are great, right? If you're just a believer, you just believe it. Maybe you've just given up on knowing. So skeptical is being really good. But people will be like, well, I don't understand. Like, magic isn't real. Like, some people would say, just try it, right? See if it works for you. I think Damien Eccles would be like, well, just try it then. Just see if it works for you. But also, magic to me is also everything else that we can't currently explain. And there's a lot that we can't currently explain, but like, just in the past, 100 years, or even like past 10 years of technology, and people now talking about deeper diving into like quantum mechanics, it's like now you have people who teach that, and they're like, hey, actually there might be a lot of truth to all these ancient scriptures and things like that. Like they might be saying something, and we're learning that because if you get outside this realm where time, or maybe even the dimension in which we think we exist in, is like blown open, it's like, hey,
absolutely,
there's a lot to tap into.
All of that, but it's also very funny to me of like people who say that like, well, magic isn't real. Meanwhile, they're living their whole lives controlled by symbols and slogans and
Nike.
like certain rhythmic music combinations, and like they're utterly controlled by magicians more powerful than them, who have them hypnotically, stupidly going around saying magic isn't real, so they remain disempowered and don't do any of their own magic that could nourish or strengthen them, and just remain these exploitable little batteries for this grand corporate engine.
I never thought of it like that.
That is 1000% what's happening, Neil.
Well, it's but also on the front, it's like when we were joking about like I wouldn't even say joke, and
we're not joking.
I was like the CIA and the government and everything, and then you're talking about this, and it was like it's the same thing, just seen in a different way. You know, just, if you make it so that it's bullshit.
I mean, also, the CIA straight up does magic. Like, the Monroe Institute, like, they straight up do astral travel and, like, visionary things.
And what was it, during World War II, they were experimenting with it, and they just found that they couldn't always trust the information. They didn't say that it wasn't real. They just said that they couldn't always trust the information. And I think part of the idea was, like, if people were doing some astral things to try and gather information, well, someone might just change their mind that day. And that's what flipped the script.
I think the Russians got better at it than the CIA. But also, I mean, Aleister Crowley was working for the British Secret Service for Churchill against the Nazis. And, the first 007 was John Dee, who was working for Queen Elizabeth and who smashed the Spanish Armada by making a tempest in a tea kettle.
What? I never heard that.
You don't know this story?
No.
I don't think I can tell the story right now because we're about to run out of space in the episode, but John Dee 1000% magicked the death of the Spanish Armada by, like, he christened little walnut shells with the names of all the Spanish ships.
Yeah.
And he did an astrological election when it was, like, this special Mars-Saturn time, and he stirred up the walnut shells in the basin and, like, baptized with the names of the Spanish ships under this special astrological auspices, and he told the English to bait the Spanish ships into coming across the channel, and he created 2 giant storms in the English Channel at a time of year where there were never storms, and sunk the entire Spanish Armada. Not a single British boat was lost. That's why we're speaking English right now and not Spanish.
Oh my gosh. That's wild.
So, magicians are also slippery creatures who sometimes work for governments and militaries, and what I'm saying is they absolutely still do, and they are more powerful than the dum-dums who go around saying that magic isn't real. And they control, some of them, I mean, I like to think of, I'm a bodhisattva, I have bodhisattva vows, I'm pretty darn benevolent if I do say so. I'm interested in the liberation of all beings from suffering. That's my commitment. And it starts with liberating myself from suffering, which is an ongoing project too. But like, there's magicians out there who are more interested in money and power and creating systems of control that span generations and that 1000% feed on people. And you know, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing everybody that he didn't exist. The greatest trick these black magicians ever pulled was convincing lots of people.
Magic wasn't real.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that magic is real, then you are much more easily magically exploited. So that's
point.
my rant for today. And I guess thank you for everybody for
thank
listening.
you.
Thanks, Neil, for talking. We're about to get close to our place and review.
Our secret magical location.
Yeah, secret magical location. Share, subscribe, tell your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Sleepover Podcast, everybody. Get your supply of food and water.
Yeah, 30
Bye-bye.
days. 30 days. 1 gallon per person per day.